You're listening to the Sisters in Loss podcast, a faith-based grief and loss podcast for Black women, where you will hear stories of miscarriage, infant loss, stillbirth, and infertility to learn there is a testimony in tragedy. You will learn how to heal, gain clarity, find hope and peace, and turn your pain into your purpose after loss. I'm your host, Erica M. McAfee. Welcome to episode 121 of the Sisters in Loss podcast. October is here, and it is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. Join us all month long as we honor and celebrate our babies who have gone to heaven far too soon. Negligence, unfair treatment due to systemic racism, killing of a premature baby. All of the words and sayings that come to mind when I think of today's guest. Aubri Cabness delivered her son Sebastien prematurely, and 3 days later in the NICU, his health started to decline. He was left off oxygen for 24 hours after being born at 1 pound and 13 ounces. His trachea was punctured, lungs lacerated, and esophagus perforated. He died of sepsis in his mother's arms due to the NICU negligence. In this episode, Aubri takes us back on that journey to her own recovery, how her story is now connecting other moms who've experienced the same trauma at the same hospital, and what justice looks like for her to continue to grieve and heal. This episode is for you to listen to if you've ever experienced racial bias and trauma in the medical system. Here is Aubri Cabness.
Thank you, Audrey, for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I like to start my interviews with you sharing a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay, I'm a hairstylist. I'm a realtor, a Maryland licensed realtor. And, I've practiced as far as hairstyling in New York and in the entertainment industry. And my degrees are in criminology and sociology from the University of South Florida. And after college, I moved back up to DC to begin my adult life officially.
Awesome. So are you currently in the DMV area?
Yes, I am.
So take us back on that journey to motherhood and share with us your infant loss story.
Okay. Well, so I like to make it clear that just because infant loss can, it encompasses so much, I like to make it clear he was killed. I had a miscarriage years before, so I know that type of pain. This type of pain is totally different due to the injustice of it all. I became pregnant, and as soon as I told my mom that I was pregnant, she was living in Florida. She had a house her whole life there. She sold the house. She put the house on the market on Monday. It sold on Thursday, and she moved up here to be with me within the next 2 months. And knowing that I had a miscarriage before. So she just wanted to be present to me, and I'm greatly appreciative of that. So I was placed on bed rest at Washington Hospital Center because they knew he was going to come early due to I had a fibroid, and the position of the fibroid, I guess they knew that he was going to come early, so they wanted to be better safe than sorry and put me on bed rest at Washington Hospital Center. And so my water broke 3 days after I got there, I believe, but we managed to keep him in like a whole nother 3 weeks. But so he was born, he was healthy. It was the best night of my life. What I found out later was that he was born on November 5th at 11:04 p.m. What I found out later was that same weekend, an area hospital, PG community hospital, had a bacterial outbreak in their NICU, their neonatal intensive care unit. And so all of those babies were transferred out to Children's Hospital and to Washington Hospital Center. So the NICU was severely overcrowded and understaffed because in a NICU, there's supposed to be one nurse to one baby. That's the ratio. That ratio was thrown all the way off due to the influx of babies. So he was fine that first day. On the morning of the 7th, well, they had paralyzed me. They had an unsupervised resident to administer my epidural. He punctured my spine, so spinal fluid was leaking. So I wasn't able to raise my head. I wasn't able to walk. I was so elated just on the birth of my son, like my miracle, my everything. I wasn't even mad if I wasn't going to be able to walk again. It might have been the high from having, my son. Just, he was the most important thing. So they intubated him initially because he was a preemie. He was 1 pound, 13 ounces. And then they say that my 1 pound, 13 ounce baby pulled out his own tubing. He was smaller. He was like the size of a small kitten, like a newborn kitten. So, that's what they say, that he pulled it out. But anyway, they left him unintubated for 24 hours, which doesn't make sense to me if you needed to intubate him, because with preemies, by the very definition of preemie, the lungs are the last to develop. So a preemie's lungs are never fully developed. That's what classifies them as a preemie. So they need that constant oxygen in order for them to do well and to thrive. So they say he pulled it out, but then they left it out for 24 hours. Well, that threw him into respiratory distress. So in trying to re-intubate him at that point, they're probably panicking. They ended up puncturing his trachea, lacerating his lungs twice, and perforating his esophagus. My issue is that because those are things, all of those injuries are things that can happen. My issue is that instead of being honest and upright and forthcoming, they tried to hide the injuries. The nation's top pediatric facility is next door, Children's National Medical Center. Instead of transferring him there, they left him choking on his own blood for 13 and a half hours. His injuries led to sepsis, pneumonia, and eventually his left lung collapsing. So a grown man couldn't sustain those types of injuries. So, and like I said, I was paralyzed. They had me in a wheelchair. He passed away in my arms the next day, but they discharged me with no baby, no explanation for what had happened, and then refused me a meeting for 6 months. From that point on, it's been a hell of a journey. So when I started posting about what happened, a number of other women of color started coming forward and writing to me and letting me know that their babies had passed away under similar circumstances in the same NICU at the same hospital at the hands of the same doctors. Some of the mothers even told me that, my mom had a long history of social work in the city, so she knew various outlets. So as soon as he passed away, she was able to make a phone call so we could make arrangements for his service and for his remains, et cetera. A lot of the other mothers didn't have those resources. So according to them, the hospital, in their grief said, "Oh, you've been through so much at this point. The last thing that we want you to do is have to pay for cremation. So just sign right here." So these women didn't have an advocate, and under duress, like they signed whatever piece of paper. They never got the baby's cremains or the baby's remains. So Sebastian's death has opened up the proverbial can of worms, where we began to realize that his death was not an isolated incident. Between all of us, we have pictures, we have videos. The hospital has never released our baby's records to us. I made 5 official records requests. I went down there each time, filled out the forms. To my last records request, the response from the hospital, the official response was from the person who is now the president. If you recall, I said that they discharged me without a meeting and they didn't meet with me for 6 months. Well, at the 6-month mark, I met with who's now the president, but at that point he was the chief medical officer. I met with the chair of neonatology, and I met with the vice president of quality control. They all admitted in that meeting everything that I'm saying. So now, since the chief medical officer had been promoted to president, for my last official records request, he wrote me this nasty letter, basically denying everything and, summing it up like with, "We're sorry for the loss of your son." No remorse, nothing. And that was, that letter that he sent was the hospital's official request to my legal right for all of my son's records. That was their answer. So it's been an uphill journey. Disheartened is not even a strong enough word to describe my disbelief at the unethical practices that I've witnessed and experienced. Yeah, so I mean, I don't even know. I went back to doing hair when I could eventually walk, like with a cane. It's just, and one thing that all of us had in common was that we happened to have been on Medicaid at the time. So I'm not sure if that played a part, and that all of our babies, they refused to transport them next door to Children's Hospital. There was one mother who was with us the passing of her baby was more recent. So she kind of fell away. I think she's going through the grieving process. But she has even said on tape that when her baby went into distress in the same NICU, that a doctor asked her, or a nurse asked her, what type of insurance do you have? And she happened to have private insurance. And she said, she called out whatever kind it was. Then she was like, why? Why'd you ask me that? And they said, oh, because if you had Medicaid, there wouldn't have been anything more we could have done for her. So I think it goes very deep with the mothers who never got their babies' bodies back or their cremains. So it's really ugly. And one of the ugliest things has been finding that nobody really cares. There's so much going on in the world. Maybe people feel overwhelmed and feel that there's little that can be done. But the other mothers and I feel that we've paid the greatest price. It's our responsibility to protect these voiceless babies.
You are so right. And oh my goodness, I also have heard a similar story at the same hospital, very similar circumstances with the child that was less than 2 pounds. So I don't know if we know the same person. We can chat and ask about that when we get offline. But I know that she is still fighting to also understand exactly why all of the things that led up into her son's passing happened as well. But it definitely was something around his punctured lungs, something with the definitely being intubated or not intubated. And he was like, I want to say 26 or 27 weeks gestation. So he definitely needed to be intubated at the time. So
October is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. Join us for our Healing and Prayer Summit. This summit is taking place online every Tuesday during the month of October. To register, go to ericaandmcafee.com/summit to get the replays of every video. We will be discussing healing after loss. We will also be discussing therapy after loss, trying again, parenthood, self-care, and advocacy after loss. You do not want to miss these videos with these dynamic speakers. Go to ericaandmcafee.com/summit, and every Tuesday a video will be posted. It's free. Join us at our Healing and Prayer Summit every Tuesday in October.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that I know a lot of people are interested in just hearing just how the story unfolds. So now, where are you in the process? Are you going through the legal part, or are you going back to the hospital to get some additional information? Are you still going back to get the actual full records? Or how are you in your process?
I'm going through the legal process. The hospital they shut me out there. My last communication with them was last July when I received that nasty letter from the president. But even going through the legal process, I had one lawyer take my money, because for medical malpractice, typically you don't pay out of pocket. They will take on a trial for like 90 days, look at the case, have their experts look at it, see if there is merit to it. And then if there is, they will only take it on if they feel they can win. So with medical malpractice, it differs from other forms of law. You don't come out of pocket typically. So this particular lawyer had me pay, a couple $100 to retain his services, and then nothing. I had another lawyer who kept the case, and a prominent, been on the cover of the Washingtonian, consistently voted one of DC's top lawyers, took the case, held it for 6 months, never returned a phone call, never gave me a status update. I had an email trail to substantiate that. And I ended up having to file a grievance against him, I believe. And he sent me to the meeting without legal counsel. His stance was that if the hospital knew that I had legal counsel, they might not be as forthcoming in meeting with me. So it sounded fair. So I went ahead, but he left me like wide open and exposed. at the same time. So I ended up having to file a grievance against him for the non-communication, no status updates, because you only have 2 years to pursue legal action. He used up 6 months. When you're dealing with a powerful attorney who has a lot of cases, and 6 months is a lot of time. That's 6 months that I could have been looking for someone else or having other people research or whatever. So it's been a journey. I do have a legal team now, very competent. I have faith in them, and so I'm working with them right now.
That's great. I'm excited to hear what the progress of your case will be. So take us back really, because it seems like this is consistent trauma. Like every time that you talk to a different lawyer or you're going back and trying to get the record from the hospital, that you keep reliving this trauma, this killing that you said, this loss. So really, how have you grieved this process? How have you started that grieving process, and where are you now?
I haven't.
Yes. Share with us.
There hasn't been time to. Like, I couldn't even take off from work. As a hairstylist, it's a different life. If you're not in the salon, you're not making money. So even not walking, like, I think within maybe a week and a half, I was able to walk with a cane. So I was back in the salon. So there hasn't been any time to grieve, because other than that, I've been advocating at whatever point that God determines, at whatever point that God says rest, then I'll be able to grieve. But as long as there's no justice for my son, and as long as I know other babies are being killed up there, I can't rest. Thank you for recognizing it has been consistent trauma. I think as Black women, we're just looked at as mules, like workhorses, like apes. I've had it called into question. I did a Washington Post article, and one of the first things that I did, I wrote to anybody who I thought would help me, who would listen. I wrote to Oprah. I wrote to Anderson Cooper, just anybody I could think of who would shed a spotlight on what's going on. And when I ended up filing the grievance against the lawyer who used up the 6 months, he put in his rebuttal, and she seemed to be seeking media attention and stuff like that. And it was so funny to me, the audacity, because that's what you do to bring something to light. I don't have a law degree. And if you're not returning my calls and I can't trust you, and even before I retained an attorney or during the whole process, I'm trying to get the word out about what's happening, because it's still going on. It didn't end with Sebastien. So I thought that was a really low blow. But there's a stereotype of the Black woman. It's almost like a lot of the attorneys who I, came up against, they're white males. It was like no compassion. It's been a journey. That's all I can say. I don't think I have any enemies. But if I do, I wouldn't wish it on anyone.
Yes, I think we all feel that way, that we don't wish this journey on anyone. But I wanted to recognize that, because I think that a lot of people don't know how to handle grief triggers when they come, especially, when anniversaries come or birthdays come, or you see a child that's similar age to what your child would have been, or just going through life and just navigating social media, because that could be a trigger for someone. But to go through some form of justice where you're trying to get justice for your son and for yourself, I believe that is just consistent trauma. And I just wanted to acknowledge that and realize that and tell you that you are resilient, you are strong. At some point in time, I do want you to definitely take time out to grieve as you go along through the process, because I don't know how long this journey is going to be for you till you get that justice, but I don't want that fight to fizzle. You keep that light shining on the inside of you. I want to know, what other resources have you used to help you on this journey? Because I remember you mentioned that you have reached out to some additional women and this process is still going on. What other vehicles have you used to help bring light to this killing that happened? And how can you, I guess, as a collaborative, all the women come together and try to shift what's happening at this hospital?
Well, so I reached out to Charles Johnson, Judge Hatchett's son, after hearing that his wife had died due to medical negligence. I don't know if you're familiar with her case, and he was the only person out of probably the 100 or so people that I reached out to. He was the only one to respond and called me back right away. And he put me in contact with the March of Dimes and the president of the March of Dimes. So what a lot of people may not know, she's a Black woman from Georgia, very compassionate, very highly educated, but she has shifted the focus of the March of Dimes. So they have been very supportive, the March of Dimes, of keeping me in the loop of, just from a distance, offering their support. And I guess it requires more women speaking out. I mean, people don't know it's happening if you don't say it. But I can understand, there were a lot more women. They all fell back. It's like you're shamed into submission. That's the best way to say it. Friends and family disappeared. My mom explained to me, because at first, at one point, I had memory loss and, it was just a mess. So my mom explained to me that maybe it was a little too hard for friends to, be around that. And I was very tearful and couldn't talk about it without crying. So, I have friends that I haven't seen since his funeral. So it's been a very lonely journey. But that is all the more reason it takes away the distractions and it makes you keep focusing on what's important. The other people, the friends and family, they can get on board later when they understand. But right now, what's important is speaking up for these babies. So any women who have experienced any of these traumas or other traumas during birth or delivery or after, I just pray that they have the strength and the support that they need to speak up and bring it to light. And you'll see in the New York Times and a lot of different periodicals, they're shedding light on, this is a nationwide trend. So in the past year, there have been tons of articles about the mistreatment of Black women and babies up to injury and death. So it's coming to the forefront.
Absolutely. And I love the work that Charles Johnson is doing with For Care for Moms. And of course, I love Stacey D. Stewart, who's the president of March of Dimes. Yeah. She is a huge advocate for Black women's infant and maternal mortality. And she's a huge supporter of Sisters in Loss as well. So I'm happy that this platform also gives your story light, because I believe that the women are listening. If you are in the DC metro area and you've had something similar happen to you, definitely reach out to Aubri and definitely we will connect, because I believe that there's strength in numbers. I believe that when you come together as a collective, that you can shift the paradigm no matter where it is. So I'm so happy that you shared this story. So what encouraging words can you give the mom out there who's in a similar situation as you're in, where they're continuing to fight for justice for their babies?
Just stay focused, keep positive people around you. You have to nurture yourself, because sometimes there won't always be positive people around you, but you just have to see the light at the end of the tunnel, whether it's your child, justice for your child that you're advocating for, or for the other babies. Maybe your child has already been taken, but you want to ensure that no other babies receive the treatment that your child did. You have to just put your head down and do the work. And, like how a horse has blinders on, just look straight ahead. That's all I can say. Like I said, I pray. Unfortunately, I know that there's another mother somewhere going through this. I wish there weren't, but feel free to reach out to me. I know you're interviewing another of the young ladies who initially reached out to me, Shakita Edwards. She and I and a few other mothers have formed Mothers United for Justice. So, you can reach out to us. And we offer any support from our standpoint. We're not professionals in this, but we're other people who are going through it. So
I love that. Mothers United for Justice. So where can we find you and connect with you and Mothers United for Justice after this episode?
On Facebook, we have a page, Mothers United for Justice. And then also I have a page for my son, Justice for Baby Sebastien. So they can feel free to write on the wall or leave me a message, and I will get back as soon as I see it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aubri, for sharing your story, sharing your light, and just not giving up the fight and not giving up hope. I'm excited to follow your journey. And if there's anything that the Sisters in Loss community can do to help support you, just reach out to me and let me know.
Thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for offering me a platform.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I pray that this show was inspirational and a blessing to you. For show notes, visit ericamcafee.com/podcast. Please join us in our offline discussions in our private Facebook group by going to sistersinloss.com. If you're listening in Apple Podcasts, please rate and subscribe to us and leave us a 5-star review. I pray that you all have a blessed week. Keep the faith, and I'll talk to you next Wednesday.